And so I dashed off down there, and to my great relief found somebody who'd just been to his funeral.
One of the most memorable characters in The Fox in the Attic is, I suppose, Augustine's cousin, German cousin, Mitzi, and the description of her going blind.
In the roof, the castle clock thumped the hour, and on the last stroke Mitzi woke. It was pitchy black. Suddenly, yesterday's sleigh ride came back to her. Moreover, this wasn't really at all the normal blackness of night. Rather, it was the negation of seeing, the absence of any visual sensation whatever. It was merely memory which had translated it into the visual terms of darkness, as being the nearest equivalent memory knew. She tried, by an effort of will, to see it as darkness again, but almost at once a chaos of meaningless sight sensation began to wake in the deprived optic nerve, like the sensation Uncle Otto said he felt sometimes in the leg, which wasn't there.
It's often the senses one's least conscious of are the ones which evoke memories most vividly. I think simply because you're not conscious of them, because they're in behind your conscious defenses. And that's why if you want to make a scene vivid, it's very bad policy as a rule to describe it simply as seen by the eye, because the reader's eye immediately gets up its defenses against you. It says, I refuse to see this. Whereas if you suddenly get behind it with a smell or a feeling of hot and cold, something like that, the reader isn't on his guard at those points in his defenses.
The Fox in the Attic blends historical material with what you've imagined. How did you absorb the documentary elements in it and transform them into fiction?
Well, they're not fiction. It's more a case of marrying up the historical truth and fictional truth.
Hitler went up with them docilely, in a miserable daze, and they took him to the big attic he knew so well of old, all full of Putzi's books. But not to bed, for once they'd got him alone up there, they stretched him out on the floor and knelt on him. One was a doctor, and they wrestled again and again with that dislocated shoulder to get it back into joint. They had no anesthetics, and for a long time, even downstairs, and with the doors shut, Helene could hear him, while the frightened baby woke and wailed.
Did the character of Hitler give you special problems?
That's rather an understatement. But I did have the great good luck to talk to the woman who hid him at Ufing. And I got all that account of the 3 days that he spent in the house in Ufing with his dislocated shoulder after the putsch. I got all that, partly from her, an account she gave me by word of mouth, and partly from a penciled account she'd written down of the happening many years before.
How did you meet her?
Well, it's a longish story, actually. Originally it started with somebody that I met at Port Marion, who said he knew her son. Her son took me and introduced me to her.
In what way do you feel, in the historical parts of it?
And she certainly, both she and her son helped me no end. He with his own early childhood memories of Hitler.
Is their name known, or is that a secret?
Well, I don't think she likes it to be. She's living very much in retirement.
Quite. You mentioned that when you wrote Wind in Jamaica, you spent really quite a long period reading all the accounts of piracy in the Times in the 19th century. Did you spend a correspondingly long time absorbing all this enormous mass of documentary material about Nazi Germany?
Well, I can't say I've absorbed it all because I'm not a big enough sponge. But I've read it all and mostly remember where I can look something up. Uncountable drafts. But always, as I'm going along, I mean, I go on working on one page until I've got it more or less as I want it before I get on to the next.
Supposing you had to try to count the uncountable drafts of, say, The Fox in the Attic, how many would you estimate it at?
Well, something between 20 and 50, I suppose. I use numbered sheets of paper so that I can, because it's easier to, if I want to go back to an earlier draft and use it again, it's easier to find it that way. And I think I used 400 sheets of paper on the first 20 pages of the volume I'm writing now. If a whole episode or chapter has to be finally scrapped, I never scrap it until I've got it as good as I can, even if I suspect I may have to tear it up. Oh yes, it's what you leave out that takes time.
Have you ever wanted to do anything else other than write?
Well, you can't help writing. I mean, I've known that since I was 6 years old and used to dictate things to my mother. I'd be playing in the garden and make up a little verse, and it felt like a hen with an egg to lay. And I'd rush into my mother and dictate it to her to get it off my chest, because I didn't dare forget it till I had. And that's gone on throughout life. I mean, some people think that writing is a form of escapism. It's the other way round. Writing is something to try to escape from. It's compulsive as a drug addiction. No, I've always felt that that's what I was a writer, much more than somebody living in a house, living in North Wales.